came in with preconceived ideas. You may leave with those ideas reinforced, or you may change your mind on something, but I appreciate coming in and listening and being part of a conversation with someone you don't necessarily agree with. I think we need a lot more of that.
Yep.
Back in the state's hands, we've seen this debate in the Republican Party about whether there needs to be any federal legislation on this. Where do you stand in that debate? Does there need to be any further federal legislation on this? Or new federal legislation?
Well, look, my touchstone for this is the Constitution. And if you look at the history of the country, for the first 180 years of our nation's history, the question of abortion was decided by elected state legislatures. It was decided by the people. And everyone has to recognize abortion is an issue that is deeply divisive. It's an issue that is personal, that is emotional, that people feel very strongly about. People feel very strongly about it on both sides and on every spot and spectrum in between. Part of the genius, I think, of our constitutional system is on issues like that are deeply emotional, that are deeply divisive. The Constitution generally leaves those decisions to the elected legislatures. It lets the political process decide that. In the Supreme Court in 1973, when it decided Roe versus Wade, what it said is national polling. That view is an extreme and radical view. 9% of Americans agree with that view, and every single Senate Democrat voted for that view. And so the position of Washington Democrats is wildly out of step with where the American people are.
All that being said, you're not in the Texas legislature, obviously, but you are a political leader in Texas. Are you like where the Texas legislature has left this issue as of this moment?
Look, I think it's a democratic process that the Texas legislature will continue to debate, and the people of Texas will remain engaged in.
How are they supposed to, how are Republicans in the legislature supposed to hear that answer? I mean, is that support for where we're at? Or?
Look, I am pro-life. I believe in defending innocent life. But I also, as with the Ken Paxton issue, am not spending my days engaged in the day-to-day legislative battles in Austin, because Washington, D.C. is a mess. And that's what the people of Texas elected me to do, is to go fight for 30 million people of Texas in D.C., and so that's what I do.
I want to move on to another topic that has been a huge part of, it was a huge part of the 2022 election.
You see elected Democrats, their approach is they want to take away the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. When I say this is what I mean, we just yell at each other. There is zero evidence that doing so protects any lives. And in fact, if you look nationally, if you look at the jurisdictions with the strictest gun control laws, almost without exception, they have among the highest murder rates and among the highest crime rates. The city of Chicago has some of the toughest gun control laws in the country, and it consistently has horrible murder rates, because what happens? If you pass a law that disarms law-abiding citizens, by definition, they follow the law. The criminals don't. And so what ends up happening is the criminals target the law-abiding citizens. So your question, there are proposals that say, listen, we want to raise the age to buy a firearm to age 21. Well, you know what? I think that a 19 or 20-year-old single mom living in the inner city in Houston or Dallas, going
she wouldn't be a single mom.
Has a right to protect herself. Okay. Has a right under the Second Amendment to protect herself from someone who commits violence against her. And I'll give a stat again. Look, this is an audience who I think has their mind made up and doesn't want to hear actual data. But you would agree with. The Obama White House, if you're going to agree that's not a right-wing source, here's what the Obama White House put out. They said every year firearms are used defensively to stop crime, to stop murder, to stop a rape, between 500,000 and 1 million times a year, every year in the United States of America. That is a very simple reality. And so when you disarm people, when you take that 19-year-old single mom and you say you can no longer defend yourself, the data show you see crime rates go up, you see murder rates go up, you see sexual assault rates go up. And if you want to stop those crimes, and listen, I believe the people here want to stop those crimes, But if you want to stop them, you should look to the data of what actually works. And what works is putting the criminals in jail. And I'll point out.
Senator, we got to move on to the next question.
But hold on. This is deeply connected with the policies Democrats have championed, defunding the police, and also George Soros prosecutors who release violent criminals. Because the same people who are all worked up about gun control are also, by and large, supporting releasing criminals from jail. And we see that pattern over and over and over again. And when it happens, so I've sat down with Texas police chiefs who said to me, we know who the criminals are. We know who the criminals are. We want to arrest them, and we can't because they keep getting let go and they keep committing more murders. If you want to stop crime, go after the criminals, not law-abiding citizens.
Let's talk about this. Quite a bit of light of it these days, following your Twitter feed, your media appearances. What's going to be your message on that in this campaign? Is it going to be lighthearted, or do you believe that the voters deserve a more serious handling of that matter?
Well, listen, I think it is an interesting thing in the partisan world we have because there's such a divide that everyone believes caricatures. And so in the world of Twitter, which is a barren wasteland, anyone on the left, their favorite thing to scream at me is "Scream Cancun," usually with some amusing gif of me in cornrows or something, which is you know, I got to say that there's an enormous amount of hypocrisy in how the media handled it, in that, you know, Joe Biden has been at the beach week after week after week while Hawaii was on fire, while natural disasters unfolded, and the press has nothing to say about it. The media had a lot of fun pounding me for it. Here's the simple reality, which is every disaster we've had in the state of Texas since I became Senate, I have worked and my team has worked vigorously to help the people of Texas. During that disaster, look, I gotta tell you, I don't know how to string power lines. When we had a freeze, when the state was frozen, I don't have the ability to control the weather. I don't have the ability to string power lines. I was at home with my wife and my daughters. Our power was out like everyone else. And so I made a decision to take my kids to the beach. And lots of other Texans made the decision that they could go elsewhere, to go elsewhere. To be clear, what I was doing in a house with no lights and no power was I was on the phone with other people in the federal government, talking in the federal government. I've been doing my job, and you can do that from anywhere. There were multiple other Texas officials who were out of state, who nobody cared about at all, but I get, if you've been told Cruz is the devil, then screaming Cancun is a wonderful partisan thing to do. But if at the end of the day, your greatest criticism of me is that I took my kids to the beach, I can live with that.
That's not the worst. That is not the worst.
One more question for you. You've become a prolific podcaster. You record a podcast 3 times a week. When I wrote this question a couple days ago, there were 290 episodes, I think, on Apple Music. What do you say to folks who question whether you're able to do your job and also have the idea of low-key media mogul?
You know, I gotta say, I find this one of the most bizarre political attacks I've ever seen. As far as I'm concerned, doing the podcast is an integral part of doing my job. My job is to represent everybody in Texas, to fight for everybody in Texas. And 3 days a week, I go on a podcast to talk with Texans and talk with people across the country about what the issues are facing this country, about immigration, about what's happening on our southern border, about terrorism, about crime, about taxes, about regulation, about the fights that are happening in Washington. And our podcast typically is recorded. I'm doing Monday's podcast Sunday afternoon. You know when I normally record the podcast? At 11 or 12 o'clock at night, because I typically work 18-hour days. I do it at the end of the day. So that's fine. I understand that just yelling at the TV and being angry doesn't take a lot of energy. But I believe our country is in crisis. I look at what's happening in Washington. It is terrifying, the direction this administration has gone. And so I jump out of bed every day fighting to save this nation. And I think the podcast is an incredibly powerful tool to give people information. And everyone who's shaking your head, just try. But you're not going to do it because we live in a world where people are minded. But I think we would all be better off if we listened to the other side more and actually engage in real discussion. You know, talking about CNN. On CNN, I did 3 debates with Bernie Sanders, one-on-one debates with Bernie Sanders, 90 minutes each. They were some of the best television Bernie has had, because listen, Bernie and I didn't sit there and insult each other. We didn't call each other an SOB. Bernie is a self-described socialist. He's an unapologetic socialist. I am an unapologetic defender of free enterprise. So we could have a real debate about, okay, what benefits people more? What lifts people out of poverty? What is better for America, socialism or free enterprise? We need more of that discussion that is honest and substantive and engaged, and that's what I say. They think any Hispanic in this country, how dare you? You must be a leftist. To any black person in this country, you say you must be a leftist. As Joe Biden said, you know, if you're not voting Democrat, you ain't black. Well, you know what? That's not something someone says. I'm actually going to ratchet back from my true sentiments on that, but it's not difficult to figure out.
Quick call on that, though. If other justices are doing it, I mean, do you support stronger ethics rules for the whole court?
Look, I think it is reasonable to have ethics standards on the court across the board as long as they're fairly applied.
Rule of law.
Now, that being said, I serve on the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Senate Democrats on the Judiciary Committee have zero interest in examining and applying the same standards to the justices they agree with. This is part of politicizing the court. This is part of emphatic supporter of term limits. Every term in Congress, I've introduced a constitutional amendment to limit members of Congress, to limit senators to 2 terms, to limit members of the House to 3 terms. I believe Washington would work much, much better with term limits. In fact, in the Senate, I chaired a hearing when I was chairman of the Constitution Subcommittee, the Judiciary Committee, on term limits, trying to push my amendment. What I have never said from day one is that I was going to unilaterally term limit myself when the other guy. And people laugh at that, but I'm in favor of a structural reform that is applied to everyone. If there were a button right here to throw all 100 senators out of the Senate, I would push the button and happily go get a job in the private sector. I think Washington would be better off if we threw all the bums out. That being said, I'm going to fight for term limits that apply to everyone, and I will eagerly.
It was a Texas nightmare. Those people aren't doing so well, my friend. And I don't know that they ever will be. And I don't know that they ever should be.
I hate to hear that. I want to then build on that. I want to come back a little bit to the obvious impact this had on you a little bit later, but I'm torn by the fact that this seems like a crude transition, but I also think it's actually an appropriate one. And I do want to talk about the politics of the race, and I want to ask you then, why are you the best Democratic nominee to face Ted Cruz?
Well, talking about Uvalde is tough because when you talk about it, Brad gets quiet, and we all have these moments, and it's tough. But it's why we have to have this discussion with ourselves. Most of America glosses over this. We have these things that happen, and we forget within a few days, and we all, Ted Cruz would be thinking and praying about him for a few days, and then he'd be done with it. There's no solutions one way or another. Doesn't even want to see how the federal government failed, because they failed too. Yeah, they went in and finally killed that person, and thank God that they were there. I think that what differentiates me from Cruz and what differentiates me from other candidates in this race is that my whole life, I was born the son of immigrants to this country. My whole life, my father and my mother taught me 2 things, and that's to work and to educate myself. But just working. And you have to put in time. We worked to uncover what happened out there, and we never gave up. And we still don't all know. I know because I've seen it. There has been zero accountability from the Department of Public Safety. Imagine we just gave that guy, Steve McCraw, a $45,000 raise. The Democrats not very clear on that. I'm never going to say a mean thing about him, but I'm going to hit him on the record. We need to have an assault weapons ban. Because I've seen what that gun can do to a child. That bullet travels 3 times as fast as a regular gun they put up. This kid put Full Metal Jacket bullets in there and tore those little babies up to like you can't believe. So let's talk about it from some economic point of view, if you could even consider that. My children don't want to go to the mall anymore. They have anxiety when we go to the mall or the movies or church. That's the reality of what's happening to us here today, is that our life is no longer the same. My parents and your parents left this place better. My generation is not doing a good job at leaving this place better. And for me, this isn't about ambition. It's about doing everything in our power to come back to some sense of normalcy and decency where we all have a chance and we're all helping each other out once and for all, because we must.
I don't want to be overly focused on tactics, but I do want to ask, you said we have to do everything in our effort. There have been a lot of efforts by Democrats over the last 20, 25 years that have fallen short. I'm wondering how you think about that in this moment. What is it that you think can be done to reverse that, or to get a different result based on what you're saying? Listen,
There's 1 million registered non-voting Latinos in this state. We're going to wake them up. Wake up. You need to wake up. And for all of the Latinos out there in the world that speak Spanish, levántate, mijito. Porque ya te tienes que despertar. Ya tienes que cambiar lo que está sucediendo en este país. We must.
Senator, you don't know. You haven't decided.
Let me just say real quick.
Yes.
I'm going to do whatever it takes to try to bring my country together. I've had enough is enough. I've never seen us divided as much as we are. I've had a person one time come up to me from back home, and it's a beautiful lady, and she says, Joe, do you know how bad things look when I'm watching television and seeing the discourse and the toxic atmosphere that you all have in Washington? And I said, make sure I understand what you're saying. You're sitting home in your comfort of your house, and you're watching on television, probably having your dinner or maybe a beverage. Try it from my seat. Try it from my seat if you think it's bad where you're living. Right. So, when I'm saying I'm going to do everything in my power to bring this country.
For that woman and for other people, but Senator, it's getting to be pretty late in the cycle. I mean, you're a smart guy. Surely you know what you're going to do.
Evan, and only in America does the next election start the day after the last election. Only in this.
But you live in that America. Come on.
Well, my filing date in West Virginia is not until January.
Okay.
So I've been saying all along, I think, that I'll make a decision by the end of the year.
But that's it. So that's good. So let's talk about the pros and the cons, and then we'll talk about the secret. So what are the pros and the cons of running for president? Surely you've thought about that, even if you haven't decided which one.
We're talking to a lot of people. Basically, right now, when you think about it, in the primary of a Democrat primary or a Republican primary, roughly 10 million people in each side elect who's going to be representing that party. Now, let's say there's 20 million people that make the decision on what you get to vote, who you get to vote for.
Right.
There'll be 150 to 160 million Americans voting. That's not much of an opportunity to have any type of challenging, if you will, or any type of an option. So people says, well, third party. The only thing I can tell you is neither party can win without the independent voter. Without that swinging vote, you can't win.
So no labels would be the vehicle that you would use to get on the
There's
ballot.
not another movement in the country that's trying to get the signatures that allows ballot access.
Okay. So then that's option one. That's option one. Option two is running for re-election in West Virginia, but as an independent. Says
There's a consideration for that.
That is.
That's a
Are
consideration.
you considering running for re-election as a Democrat?
Consideration.
That's a consideration. And then the third option is retiring from politics. You know, look, Senator, the theory is that in the state of West Virginia,
y'all like the best.
the theory is that in the state of West Virginia, where you and I earlier today visited, we talked about the fact that you are the only Democrat to be elected from West Virginia federally right now, right? There is no other office held by a Democrat, correct?
Donald Duck should be able to win as a Republican in my state.
So my question,
And sometimes they call me Donald Duck.
my question to you would be, if you ran for re-election as a Democrat, would you not be putting yourself, what did you say that West Virginia is R plus what?
R40.
R40.
For the reddest state in the nation, this is Wyoming.
R40. Why would you run into the buzzsaw of that problem, running as a Democrat for re-election?
You know what, Evan, I've never been afraid of losing. So if you're not afraid of losing and you think you're doing the right thing and you give it all you got, and I never intended to lose when I get involved.
So it's possible that you would run as
It's
a Democrat.
possible I would run as a Democrat, and if I run as a Democrat in West Virginia, I would intend absolutely to win.
Right.
Because I think we have a record to win on.
Do you think you'd have a better chance of running as an independent?
That's to be said. We're looking at.
Well, so game theory that out for us. Tell us what you're thinking.
Well, basically, you're saying that let me just tell you about West Virginia. I was asked by a Democrat one time in 2014 when the state really changed. My state changed quicker than any other state in the nation has changed. We were totally, like, when I was governor, I had 78 out of 100. House of Delegate members, I had 78 Democrats. And I saw my dear, dear friend Lisa Murkowski would not be in the Senate if it wasn't for Rachel. So that might be a equalizer. I'm looking at it.
And again, the reason is that it prioritizes moving to a place where you get people from both sides.
That's exactly right.
In order to get
And more people that you can move over and make your vote count.
Yep.
That it worked. And Lisa, if you ever have her here, she'll tell you exactly what I was watching.
Senator, it's been fun to talk to you.